up on this Friday edition of Newsline at noon, the government and the ruling party call an emergency meeting to discuss ways to protect children following public uproar over child abuse at daycare centers. North Korea's repeated demand for an end to annual joint military exercises between South Korea and the U.S. dims the prospects for proposed reunions of families separated by the Korean War. Plus, 2 suspects have been killed during an anti-terrorism raid in Belgium aimed at preventing what they called imminent terror attacks. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's new Friday, January 16th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this afternoon, public outrage over a recent case of child abuse at a daycare centre in Incheon is intensifying, with parents across the nation understandably concerned about the safety of their own kids in such facilities.
Now, with video footage of the abuse spreading like wildfire on the internet, the government and the ruling party are set to announce measures to try and protect small children from any kind of abuses. Park Ji-won reports.
The government and ruling party are scheduled to hold an emergency meeting on Friday afternoon to come up with measures to prevent child abuse at daycare centers. Ruling Saenuri Party leader Kim Moo-sang will preside over the meeting to be held at a municipal childcare information center in western Seoul. Minister of Health and Welfare Moon Hyung-pyo will also attend as the government's representative. The ruling party and government also agreed to set up a joint task force to deal with the issue. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party has also vowed to devise measures to counter child abuse. One of the measures being discussed would make the installation of CCTV cameras at childcare centers compulsory. It would also require stronger qualifications for daycare supervisors while weeding out those who had been convicted for child abuse. The number of childcare centers in Korea has skyrocketed over the years, from some 5,000 in early 1990s to over 43,000 last year. Although the government provides the centers with some $5.5 billion annually, only 10% are public facilities. The rest are private centers believed to be lacking the proper supervision. Meanwhile, the number of cases of abuse at both public and private facilities has more than doubled in recent years, from 100 in 2010 to over 230 in 2013. There are currently more than 1.4 million infants and children being taken care of at the nation's childcare centers. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
There's a tug-of-war going on between the two Koreas. The South wants to hold a round of reunions for war-separated families, while the North is protesting the upcoming joint military drills between Seoul and Washington. Now, experts are concerned the back and forth will drag on the momentum for dialogue. Hwang Seung-hee reports.
A fundamental solution for war-separated families will be South Korea's top priority if it engages in talks with North Korea. The South Korean government wants to make reunions regular and routine for hundreds of families that lost contact during the Korean War 6 decades ago. Seoul has said it's willing to address issues of North Korea's interest in return, like the lifting of sanctions and resuming tours to Mount Kumgang. As a starter, South Korea has proposed a round of reunions for separated families next month.
이번 설을 전후로 이산가족 상봉이 이루어질 수 있도록 북한이 열린 마음으로 응해 줄 것을 기대합니다.
The reunions could take place as late as the end of next month, since the joint military drills between Seoul and Washington have been pushed back to the first week of March. But a postponement of the training exercise is not enough for Pyongyang. North Korea's ambassador to the United Nations in Geneva on Thursday protested the upcoming drills, threatening another Korean war.
Otherwise, if we stand still and if we are in the state of pause, then there might be another Korean War, the second Korean War in the peninsula.
Seoul's Unification Ministry said Friday that its proposal for a reunion event still stands and that it does not plan to make another offer for talks. But with North Korea sitting on South Korea's offer for more than 2 weeks, analysts say the current tug-of-war could lead to a loss of momentum for better inter-Korean ties. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
The South Korean Red Cross, meanwhile, will push to hold regular reunions for families separated by the Korean War. Under a plan called Action 110, drawn up to mark its 110th anniversary, the organization will seek North Korea's cooperation to locate the surviving relatives of some 68,000 South Korean families. In addition, it will propose launching a letter exchange program for them and offer more humanitarian aid to North Korea. The last round of reunions was held last February.
South Korea and the United States have put their combined military operation division into operation. The formation of the joint leadership body is designed to enhance the Allies' defense posture if a war were to break out. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
South Korea and the U.S. have forged the world's first combined division to enhance their joint defense posture and combat capabilities. 30 South Korean officers have been dispatched to the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division in Korea's central Gyeonggi-do province to join up with the division. Military officials say the current Combined Forces Command ensures strategic cooperation between the allies, but the new combined division strengthens tactical-level wartime cooperation. A 2-star U.S. 2nd Division commander will head the division, while a South Korean brigadier general is second in command. A South Korean mechanized infantry brigade will be combined with the 2nd U.S. Infantry Division during wartime, with U.S. forces in charge of operations and South Korean forces looking after logistics. If war were to break out, the division will be expected to undertake civilian affairs operations in North Korea, and they'll also be tasked with removing weapons of mass destruction, including Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal. The division will be relocated to Camp Humphrey in Pyeongtaek, Gyeonggi-do Province by 2016 under the Land Partnership Plan. The division headquarters will also be moved to Pyeongtaek, along with the Joint Allied Staff. To enhance interoperability and combat readiness, the Combined Command is scheduled to hold a joint training drill next week. They'll also take part in the Joint Key Resolve and Coal Eagle training exercises in early March. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, Korea is maintaining its stance that Tokyo must apologize and properly compensate the victims of Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women before and during World War II. This after Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said he would uphold a landmark apology to the victims. He made this pledge during a meeting on Thursday with a group of Korean lawmakers. Connie Kim reports.
Korea has once again called for a swift resolution to the issue of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement, citing the advancing ages of the surviving victims. Speaking to reporters on Friday, a day after a group of Korean lawmakers met Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Tokyo, Korea's presidential office spokesperson Min Kyung-uk stressed that the wartime sexual enslavement issue is a humanitarian issue that should be dealt quickly. More than 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve as sex slaves to the Japanese military in the early 20th century, and 55 surviving victims are waiting for an apology from the Japanese government. Also on Thursday, Chu Cheol-gi, Cheongwade Senior Secretary for Foreign Affairs and Security, said Korea will reciprocate when Japan takes action to uphold a landmark apology to the victims of wartime sexual enslavement issued in 1993. Abe had told the Korean delegation that Tokyo does not deny the Kono statement and that the comfort woman issue is heartbreaking. He said it is regrettable that the issue has been turned into a political dispute, but did not propose a concrete resolution. Bilateral ties between Korea and Japan have been at a historic low, mainly because Japan continues to deny its historic wrongdoing. The two countries are hoping to improve their relations this year, which marks the 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties between them. On Monday, the two countries will meet in Tokyo for high-level talks to discuss the wartime sexual slavery issue, raising expectations of a possible breakthrough in relations between the two countries. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The United States and Cuba will take a huge step towards normalizing their relations on this Friday as Washington is going to substantially ease travel and financial restrictions on Havana. This means many more Americans will be able to travel to Cuba without a license, and Americans, who mostly Cubans living in the United States, will no longer be restricted in the amount of money they wire to or even spend on the island. Americans will also be able to use their credit and debit cards while they're in Cuba. The move is the first tangible step toward rebuilding diplomatic ties between the two countries that have been almost completely severed since 1961. The changes, however, do not lift the US embargo on Cuba, which will remain in full effect. Well, let's continue to look through the global headlines with Eunice Kim, who joins us from the News Centre.
Eunice, Europe is dreading more possible terror attacks on this Friday, and overnight special forces in Belgium have killed 2 suspects in one of several anti-terror raids conducted throughout the country.
Yeah, that's right, Jin-joo. Authorities say they thwarted a major and imminent attack with the sweep that is suspected to be linked to Islamic extremists. Connie Lee has the details for us.
Belgium's threat level today is at its second highest point, at level 3.
Complementary measures of protection and security will be taken for evident reasons that we are not going to communicate.
This after authorities there staged a counter-terror raid in the eastern city of Vevey. Gunfire rang out between police and the suspects under the cover of night at a building on Thursday. 2 suspects died in the shootout and 1 was injured and arrested, according to Belgian authorities.
The investigation was able to establish that this group was about to commit terrorist attacks. The suspects immediately and for several minutes opened fire with military weaponry and handguns on special forces of the federal police before being neutralized.
Officials say the group of suspected terrorists, who are believed to have recently returned to Belgium from fighting in Syria, were planning to launch attacks on a grand scale imminently. A Belgian counter-terrorism official says anti-terror raids are continuing in Brussels and surrounding areas now. The massive anti-terror raid comes just a week after the terrorist attacks in Paris at the office of satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo, which left 12 people dead, and at a kosher supermarket where 4 hostages were killed. Authorities, however, say that for now, they see no direct link between those attacks and the events that unfolded in Belgium. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
And just across the border, France is being pummeled again, this time in cyberspace. The French military's head of cyber defense said 19,000 websites in the country have come under cyber attacks since last week. He said most were minor denial of service attacks that targeted government and military sites, as well as those of private businesses. Some were carried out by well-known Islamic hacker groups, such as the Middle East Cyber Army and Cyber Caliphate. No major damage, though, has been reported. Meanwhile, a flurry of emotions was evoked as the country buried 4 of the 12 people killed in the satirist magazine attack. A policeman, columnist, and 2 cartoonists were put to rest Thursday, including Bernard Verlaque, also known as Tignis, whose coffin was covered in cartoons. Pope Francis has begun his first full day in the Philippines as Asia's largest Catholic nation hosts its first papal visit in 20 years. Just a couple hours ago, the pontiff started his day with a visit to the presidential palace in Manila, where he met and spoke to several members of the country's leadership. He had said his 5-day trip would center on the poor. He will head to the area devastated by Typhoon Haiyan to console the survivors of the powerful typhoon that had left more than 7,000 people dead. A public mass on Sunday is expected to draw record crowds. More than 80% of the country identify as being Catholic. And finally, 2 American climbers made history this week by summiting a 900-meter vertical rock at Yosemite National Park in California, relying only on their physical strength. Let's go ahead and first hear from one of those climbers.
Every time you finish a really hard pitch on the wall, like 15 or 20, like the last hard one up to Wyandotte, at least for me, when you would grab that last hold, you could literally feel all the the hope and desire and stress just like drip off of you, and you're just hanging there in silence and relief and joy, and it's like the coolest feeling. And mantling up on the top was kind of the same, in that there was nowhere else to go. We were standing on top.
36-year-old Tommy Caldwell and 30-year-old Kevin Georgeson began what's being dubbed as the climb of the century 19 days ago without bolts and sophisticated climbing tools. The Dawn Wall route of Yosemite's El Capitan face is a challenging path with sharp pebble-sized holds that literally make your fingers bleed. On Wednesday, the pair pushed through the most formidable part of the climb, the deep vertical rock cleft, to reach the top. It was the third attempt for the duo after efforts in 2010 and 2011.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broome and Eoh Jin-joo.
I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
Market researcher, strategy analytics said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about 11.
Korea's central bank slashed its growth outlook for this year by half a percentage point on Thursday, but the government is a tad more optimistic and is sticking to its target, which is higher than the BOK's new forecast. Speaking to businessmen in Korea's southern port city of Busan on Thursday, Finance Minister Choi Kyung-won said his ministry's growth target of 3.8% is achievable. Now, despite risks at home and abroad, Choi cited falling oil prices, Korea's expansion of FTAs, and increased investment plans by conglomerates such as Hyundai and Samsung as some of the factors that could lead economic growth this year. The Korean government has an ambitious plan for its push for a creative economy this year. It plans to inject 100 trillion won, that's roughly $92 billion in creating new economic growth engines. Our Lee Ji-yoon has more on where the funds will flow.
A total of $166 billion will be poured into establishing a so-called vibrant creative economy this year. More than half of those funds, $92 billion to be exact, will be used to foster innovative startups and small and mid-sized firms. To make sure that bright ideas don't go to waste, the money will support the startups from beginning to end by offering financial tips and funds. Securities firms specializing in mergers and acquisitions between small and medium-sized businesses and venture companies will be developed, and startups that are deemed to have strong solvency will be exempt from joint liability payments. By region, a creative economy valley with a focus on boosting the gaming industry will be established at Pangyo Techno Valley on the outskirts of Seoul. Additional infrastructure will be built to attract more information and communications technology-oriented businesses and talent. In Seoul, what's being called a high-tech startup campus will be set up on Taeran Street, one of the capital's busiest business districts. Some 160 angel investment groups and startup teams will settle into the 10,000 square meter campus by 2017. They will each be given up to $920 million over 3 years to use for research and development. The government also says it will put a heavy emphasis on getting a share of the global biotechnology market, as well as the climate and energy sectors. This, the government says, will be done by helping some 2,400 domestic-focused firms transform themselves into export-oriented companies. Lee Ji-yoon, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics has launched a new smartphone in India that runs on its own operating system. The Z1 is the company's first Tizen-powered handset, marking a symbolic departure from its reliance on Google's Android platform. The low-end model is equipped with a 4-inch screen and will cost just over $90. Meanwhile, local rival tech firm LG Electronics is set to release its latest flagship G Flex 2 smartphone in Korea at the end of this month. The device won high praise for its high-end specs and innovative flexible display at this year's Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas.
Now, with the devastating outbreak of bird flu in 2011 fresh in everyone's minds, the Korean government has announced preemptive measures to try and nip this latest outbreak in the bud at the earliest possible moment. There's going to be a day-and-a-half-long complete lockdown of all poultry farms, workers and vehicles from early Saturday morning. Shin Se-min reports.
The movement of birds, farm workers and vehicles at tens of thousands of farms across the entire nation will come to a complete standstill for 36 hours from the early hours of Saturday morning. This is the first ever nationwide lockdown on the transportation of poultry as the government tries to prevent the spread of bird flu. Korea's Agriculture Ministry says the movement ban will remain in effect from 6 a.m. on Saturday until 6 p.m. on Sunday. Some cattle farms are also on lockdown to prevent the spread of foot and mouth disease. That 36-hour window will be used to disinfect farms, buildings, and vehicles used to transport animals.
These measures will hopefully suppress the spread of the bird flu, as cases have been popping up in different parts of the country.
This marks Korea's third large-scale attempt to decontaminate poultry farms and facilities since the first case of bird flu in this outbreak was confirmed last July. Also, for the first time, the government will penalize farmers who don't abide by the measures. The maximum penalty has been set at more than $9,000 or possibly even a few months in prison. While there is understandable concern, the Agriculture Ministry notes that this is not considered a major bird flu outbreak yet, and the lockdown is just a precautionary measure. The bird flu is thought to come into Korea from migratory birds that come to the country during the winter months. There have been cases of bird flu dotted around the country, with confirmed cases found in Korea's southwestern Jeollanam-do province, the southern city of Busan, and the central Gyeonggi-do province. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, Google says it expects people will be using its self-driving cars on public roads within 5 years' time. The company has already started talks with a number of automakers, and Korea's LG Electronics is also going to play an integral role. Kim Min-ji reports.
Self-driving cars are not science fiction, they're real and coming soon. Google says that autonomous cars should be on public roads within the next 5 years, although they would still be test vehicles. Speaking at a conference in Detroit, Chris Urmson, the director of Google's self-driving car project, underscored safety and said the cars would be monitored to see how they interact with other vehicles and pedestrians. He wants to reach the stage where his test team no longer pilots the cars. In a recent interview with Reuters, Urmson said Google is teaming up with auto suppliers to speed up the process.
So yeah, we've been talking with the automotive community for the last few years. We are really excited about the technology. We are excited to push it forward for all the benefits and safety and convenience and just kind of making the world a better place.
Korea's LG Electronics, for one, will supply battery packs for the high-tech vehicles. Urmson says that autonomous cars will bring a breakthrough to transportation, not only a game changer for regular drivers, but also for the disabled or elderly. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Well, we're having a gloomy and dusty Friday here in Korea, and this afternoon will be 4 to 5 degrees lower than yesterday. And right now we have lots of clouds covering the peninsula, and northern parts of the country have been receiving on and off light rain, which should completely let up shortly. And right now it's spreading to other parts, but there will be a very light one as well. With that in mind, here are the readings for today. Now, the high in Seoul will climb up to 4. While Daegu and Gwangju should peak at 8 and 6, while Busan will top out at 11 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon will rise to 10 and 4 respectively, while Dokdo peaks at 7. Now, today's rain will pull temperatures down to the seasonal averages. Tomorrow morning, Seoul will start off the day at -5, but temperatures will become mild again on Sunday, and next week looks to be very promising. That's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
And that brings us to the end of this edition of Newsline at Noon.
Yes, have a wonderful weekend and join us again, if you can, at the same time on Monday. Until then, goodbye.